webinar with Justin Prim. Justin is an American lapidary and gemologist living and working in Bangkok. He has studied gem cutting traditions all over the world, as well as attending gemology programs at GIA and AIGS. He is currently working on a book about the worldwide history of gemstone fasting. As an author, teacher, and a gem cutter, Justin Prim presents an in-depth look at the art of gem cutting. He will begin with an overview of fasting and end with the art of recutting to add more value. GemAtlas is a global B2B networking platform for the gems and jewelry industry. We help you connect with businesses and professionals around the world. You can easily start generating new business leads through our platform. We are honored to have this discussion with Justin today. And the topic for discussion is the transformative power of gem cutting. There will also be a Q&A session at the end of Justin's presentation. So please feel free to enter your questions below and have them answered at the end of the session. Over to you, Justin.
Hello, how's it going? Thanks everybody for being here. I'm excited. Usually when I'm giving webinars, it's really late for us here in Bangkok time. So for once, we get to do one in a sort of normal middle of the day time. So I'm very happy to be here. Thanks so much for GemAtlas for having me, for asking me. Yeah, I'm excited. This is a brand new presentation that I've just created for this moment in time. It's going to be called The Transformative Power of Gem Cutting. So as she said, my name's Justin K Prim. If you haven't met me before, then hi, welcome. I'm an American gem cutter. I've been out in Bangkok for the last 4 years, working at a school called the Institute of Gem Trading. We're teaching gemstone cutting out here, among other things. And while I've been teaching and working with students and working with the gemstone cutters here in Thailand, I've also been working on a couple of books, and one of them is just coming out now. It's called The Secret Teachings of Gem Cutting, and I'm very excited about that. We've been really learning a lot about gem cutting as we write these books and we write these articles and go around the world meeting different gem cutters. So it's been kind of an amazing journey over the last few years. And a lot of that stuff that I've learned has gone into today's talk and some of the other talks that I've done before. So aside from just teaching, I've also been going around the world training. So every time I meet a gem cutter or a master cutter in a different country, I try to take some time and learn their techniques, learn their styles, learn the unique way that they're cutting gemstones so that I can kind of put that back into my own research, into my own classes and stuff like that. And aside from the lapidary training, I also have a background in gemology through GIA and AIGS here in Bangkok. So today, the transformative power of gem cutting. So a lot of people think that gemstone cutting is just only one part of the whole chain of events that take raw materials out of the earth and bring them to the consumer in the retail sector. But I would argue actually that gem cutting is actually not just a small part of a larger manufacturing chain, but it's actually the heart that the gem and jewelry trade revolves around. So without the gem cutter, gemstones could not be used in jewelry. Without gem cutting, jewelry would only be precious metals with no stones. And without gemstone jewelry, in my opinion, at least, there really isn't much jewelry left to choose from. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is the gem cutter and how much power the gem cutter has over the materials that they're cutting, and how one gem cutter might take a relatively unimpressive looking piece of rough, such as this Umba sapphire, which looks a little gray and a little dark, and maybe if you hadn't seen one before, you wouldn't really think that something stunning would come out of it. But actually, through the gem cutter's art and the gem cutter's knowledge, we're able to turn that same stone into something like this. A dazzling and colorful work of gemstone art. So whether the gemstones that you're working with are tiny and they come together to create a mosaic-like impression of color and form, or maybe they're a larger, more vibrant centerpiece and focal point for the jewel, gemstones really are an essential part of modern jewelry. And I believe that the work of the gem cutter is absolutely necessary to today's jewelry industry. Gemstones are cut in many ways in many countries all over the world, and we can thank the skill and the ingenuity of all these gem cutters for supplying us with the stones we need to create our beautiful pieces of jewelry. As I said, without them, we would only be able to work with precious metals. We wouldn't have the focal point of today's jewelry, which is really, the gemstone. So today I want to explore some of the ways that the gem cutter can influence the final appearance, the color, the shape, the style, and the look, the feeling, the mood of the gemstones that we use every day. And I also want to look at how those stones might even be able to be improved through the art of the gem cutter. So today I want to talk about power, I want to talk about beauty, and I want to talk about value, the transformative art of the gem cutter. So the gem cutter truly has all the power in their hands as they work to transform a rough rock into a lively gemstone. By understanding the needs of the gemstone, the gem cutter can create something truly eye-catching and symmetrical instead of something that looks like a colorful but lumpy potato. So here we can see two pink tourmalines. The one on the right obviously has a more vivid color, but the shape is unappealing. The faceting is bad, the polishing is bad. This would be a hard stone to sell, and even in jewelry, this would be a hard stone to love. When we look on the left, same material, different level of color saturation, but the cutting is superb. Here we can see a stone that presents the viewer with a balanced, symmetrical pattern and a captivating focal point, plus lots of sparkle. I think anyone that picked up this stone would instantly be attracted to its symmetry, its balance, its beauty, its color. It's a well-cut stone. And so one of the things that I want to look at today is well-cut stones versus what we see on the right. So by perfecting their craft, the gem cutter can create life in something that otherwise might look dull and unimpressive. So here we can see two orange garnets. The one on the left seems to glow with a fiery life. We can really see the pattern. Even though we're only looking at the photo, we can have a feeling that this stone has a lot of life, a lot of movement, a lot of sparkle. We can see it in the pattern, even in a still image. Whereas the one on the right, it seems to be asleep. Maybe it's dreaming of the day when it's going to be able to be recut into something a little bit more beautiful and animated and dazzling like the stone on the left. With the knowledge of gemology, the gem cutter can use their understanding of critical angles and physics and optics to make sure that the stone is fully reflective. So in this picture, we can see two identical sapphires side by side. Notice that on the left side, we have a stone that hasn't been cut with the correct angles. Even if you didn't know anything about gem cutting, I think anybody can look at these two stones and notice that there's something different between them. There's something different about the stone on the left. And notice how we can see right through the stone in the middle, and we can read the words that are behind the stone. So this is telling us there's something a little bit wrong with this stone. The angles are not correct. And because the angles are not correct, it has what we call a window. So the window just directly means we can see straight through the stone, just like looking out the window of your house and you can see what's outside. When we look into the gemstone, we don't want to look through a window. We don't want to look and see what's behind the gemstone. We want to see the gemstone itself. We want to create that mirroring effect, that reflects light, reflects color, that sparkles and shines and dances with light and color. So we can see that in the stone on the right, which has been cut with the correct angles and cut with a respect to the material, we don't have that window. And so the entire stone is full of reflection. You know, in the middle of the stone, the red color is deep and dark and saturated, whereas on the stone on the left, we don't have that reflection. So we're just looking at sort of a pale, transparent version of what the stone could be. So the stone on the left could do with a makeover so that it can be recut in order to look like the stone on the right. Proper angles. So here we can see that the stone cutter has mastered their craft, and also by understanding the market, the gem cutter can perform the magic trick of losing weight while gaining value. So in this example, we can see on the left, well, these are the same stone, left and right, same stone. It starts out as a 2.89 carat Burmese Spinel. The outline shape isn't very attractive. It's dark. It's a little bit funny looking. And because the angles that were used for the stone, it's not really showing us its hidden blue color. The cutter didn't use the right angles to cut the stone, and that makes the stone dark. When we recut the stone, we can see on the right side, the recut now has a more appealing shape. And by using the correct angles, the stone's still dark. It's a dark stone, you know, it's a dark bluish gray spinel. So there's nothing that we're ever going to do to make it not be a dark stone. But despite the darkness of the stone, you can now really see the blue color that's inside. You know, it's shining all the way around. It's not black anymore. It's more blue than anything else. And to me, when I look at these two stones, the color is night and day. The shape is night and day. But the amazing thing about this recut is look at the bottom. Look at the price. We bought this stone on the left for $150. We lost 40% of the stone's weight, but we managed to actually add value to the stone. We added $400 onto its value. For a stone that we bought for $150, we sold it for $550. So this is what I mean when I say this magic trick. We lose weight, but yet we can still gain value. So this is one of the, let's say, special powers of the gem cutter. So gem cutting should be the intersection of art and science. It's a creative art. The gem cutter needs to understand the gemological requirements of each material so that they can be cut with these proper angles, proper polishing techniques. But gem cutting is not just a mechanical action. It's not just a science. It's not just a trade. It's also an art form. So the gem cutter needs to have also the creative eye, be able to imagine the hidden beauty that's inside of each piece of rough that comes across their desk. So every time the gem cutter picks up that rough piece, they're able to visually understand what they're going to be able to do through their experience, through their training, through their knowledge, through their expertise, and create these kind of works of gemstone art that you can see in front of you right now. So let's look at a few examples, and I'm going to show you this way that the gem cutter can see and the way that the gem cutter can visualize what could be improved or what could be created from a gemstone. So going from the rough to the faceted stone, this is the ultimate journey for the gemstone, going from that state where it comes straight out of the earth and becomes transformed into something that's ready for jewelry, ready for the end market. So notice how the cutter with these four stones, these four tourmalines, has worked with the natural shape of the rough, but also used her creativity as well as her understanding of the optics of gemstones to create bright and balanced stones. So, you know, taking the stones into our hands, and we understand, okay, these are tourmalines. Some of them are lighter, some of them are darker. So they all need something different. We know that the tourmaline has to be cut like a tourmaline. We can't cut it like it was a quartz. We can't cut it like it was a sapphire. We definitely can't cut it like it was a diamond. It needs its own special angles. And you can see here that when we look from the rough on top to the cut stone on the bottom, the cutter has truly brought out the life, brought out the color, brought out the brightness and the brilliance of each stone. You can see that each stone gets brighter from the rough to the cut, but it also gets more dazzling. It gets more sparkling. And this is really what we want out of our stones. You know, not just weight, but not just brightness either. We want color, we want life, and we want to balance that with yield as well, because of course, gemstone is a business. Okay, so in this example, we're seeing another one of these Burmese gray spinels. This time, instead of being a sort of bluish gray spinel, it's more of a silvery or just a pure gray spinel. There's not really much color here. And when we look at the stone on the left, we can see, again, the outline shape is it's a bit unusual. It's not balanced. It looks a little bit unpleasant, at least to my eye. After the recut, you can see that we've balanced the shape, we've made it perfectly symmetrical, and by enhancing the faceting pattern and using the correct angles, we've taken a lackluster stone and turned it into something that really shines back with light from all angles. I mean, I think anyone would agree that, you know, before the recut to after the recut, it's a huge difference of, you know, of presence, of life, of brilliance. And again, you know, we've done that magic trick of losing weight but increasing value. The stone on the left would be maybe something that sits around in the store or sits around in the jeweler's case, whereas the stone on the right, let's say within one day of posting it on the internet, it was already sold. And this is always what we see when we take these lackluster stones and we give them a new life. They move quickly and the value goes up. So here we're looking at an emerald. On the left, we can see the original emerald was okay. It's not a bad stone, but it isn't being cut with the full potential that could be with this stone. Now, of course, with emeralds, we always have to be very, very careful about the weight. We can't cut the stone as if it was a tourmaline or even as if it was a gray spinel. You know, the value in 1 carat of emerald is so high that we really have to respect the weight of the emerald. But here you can see with some very minor adjustments to the pavilion, the bottom of the stone, I was able to take a sort of darker emerald and make it into something a lot more vibrant, a lot more bright, that really allows you to see the color inside without being too distracted by the inclusions, you know, presenting that balanced face with something that really shines. The tone has been lightened, the color has been enhanced, and less, you know, just about 1 carat lost makes a very happy customer. So here we can see in orange garnet. So notice how much the color was improved after the recut. You know, on the left side, we can see a deep but very dark color with a big window in the middle. You can see as I turn the stone to look directly in, right around here, we're not getting much reflection. This is a window, so we're seeing straight through the stone, and we're not getting the full impact of what the stone could be, you know, what kind of life and color the stone could show us. So notice now after the recut, we've completely changed the pattern. We didn't need to change the shape on this one, but we went from a Portuguese cut into a mixed cut. And notice how much more of the orange color comes through and how much less of a dark black undertone is inside of the stone. Now, of course, we had to lose some weight to do it. In this case, we lost quite a bit, but given the nature and the price point for orange garnet, it was entirely acceptable to lose this much weight, because actually the color is what's giving this stone its value, not the size. You know, an 8.6 carat dark garnet is a lot less desirable than a 4.2 carat bright orange garnet. And the customer again was extremely happy to lose the weight because the value of the stone goes up exponentially. And again, this is all done through an understanding of proper angles, proper symmetry, and an artistic balance of the faceting pattern. Now, in this example, this one is maybe one of my favorite ones that we've done. Very, very, very small change. You can see in the weight, half a carat, less, or just about half a carat lost. The outline shape is exactly the same. The crown is exactly the same. I made a very small adjustment to the angles that were used on the bottom of the stone. I didn't even change the pattern. It's the same exact pattern with just slightly different angles. And notice how much different the color is here. We go from a stone that almost looks black with a hint of red at certain points to a stone that is completely red, full of reflection, full of light, full of color, and half a carat lost for this much color and brightness gained. I think anybody would agree, well worth the weight loss, because the transformation is very impressive. It's substantial how much more color we have with such a small adjustment. Okay, here, this is a big one. This is the biggest one that we're going to see in this presentation. 95 carat tourmaline. This was a humongous stone. Now, the problem with this humongous stone, the customer had the stone for years. Maybe you might have a stone like this in your gemstone safe as well. You've been sitting on it. It's not moving. It's a giant stone, very, very impressive at 100 carats, almost 100 carats, but nobody wants to buy the stone. It's very, very dark. It's huge. You can see the bottom of the stone almost looks like a disco ball. There's so many facets around this bulbous stone. This was cut for weight. I'm calling this one the Tourmaline weight loss program, because you can see we go from a 95 carat to a 68 carat stone. Now, this sounds like a huge loss, and of course it is. 40 carats. This is we lost a whole entire other stone. But look what happens from the before to the after. In the original stone, we basically have a black stone with a window in the middle. If I just pause this for a second, all of this area around here is what we're seeing as color. Now, this is a orangey pink stone. We're not really getting a sense of orange or pink here. It's just purely black. And this whole area in the middle is just window. It's not reflection. It's not sparkle. It's not a color that's coming back to you. It's literally just seeing through the stone. So I would say literally every aspect of this stone is improperly cut. From the too deep, too many facet angles around here, which is not giving us back any of the stone's color, to the too flat, too rounded angles out here, which is also not giving us back any brightness, any sparkle. It's just dull. We're just looking through the stone. We might as well have just cut the stone flat like a window, like a piece of glass, and just appreciate looking through the stone. But of course, this isn't what we want to get out of a gemstone. We want something that's full of life, full of sparkle, and definitely full of color. And you can see from the before to after, now in the after this weight loss program, this gemstone cutting trick, we're able to see, okay, we have orange color, we have pink colors, we have peach colors, and as it moves, we can see that different parts of it are sparkling, and right there we get the true color of this stone. When you really get the light reflection, look how much peach and pink comes back, and orange, whereas before all we're seeing is a really dark black color. So big loss of weight, but once that extra bulk is removed, we're able to really appreciate more reflection, the real color of the stone, and no more black in the body. So, okay, we've seen some nice pictures. We've seen some nice before and afters. Let's actually look at, how does this magic trick work? How do we go about losing weight while increasing value? I'm going to show you two examples where I really break it down here, and we're going to see how this looks from a price point of view. Here we've got a hot pink Spinel. This belongs to my buddy here in Bangkok, Asia Lounges. So he was kind enough to give me some sort of behind the scenes information about this stone. So hot pink Spinel, sometimes called Jedi Spinel. You've probably heard about these stones because they've been a very hot topic in the last couple of years. So he bought this stone. This is a 4.3 carat stone. We're looking at it after the recut. I didn't have a before picture, so we're just looking at the stone after it's been recut. So the original stone he bought for 4.3, it's a 4.3 carat stone. He bought it for about $15,000. So this is $3,500 per carat. He bought the stone, but he wanted to do a recut. He wanted to maximize the beauty, maximize the color, everything. He wanted to make it perfect. So we recut the stone, lost 1.7 carats. So based on that original price per carat, we just lost $6,000, right? We lost 1.76 carats at $3,500 a carat. Maybe if you didn't have an idea that what was going to happen, you might be getting very nervous. Losing $6,000 off of a $15,000 investment. This is almost half the value of the stone. But, so after the recut, the stone weighs 2.5 carats. So we've lost quite a bit of the stone. But instead of the stone being worth $3,500 a carat, it's now worth $8,000 a carat. And he sold the stone. He sold the stone for $22,000. So he added $6,900 onto the stone, even though we lost, a significant amount of the weight. How is this possible? How can you lose, let's say, almost half the stone and add such a huge amount of value onto the stone? It all has to do with color, brightness, shape. Before the stone, it wasn't really showing that hot pink color. It was pink, but it was dark. It wasn't showing off the true beauty and the color, the brightness. So once the recut happened, the material was the same. It was clean. It was an amazing pink color, but now because it has proper angles, it's really shining. It's really bright, and the outline shape is good. It can be now used for the highest end jewelry. This stone went straight to Paris and went into a very high-end piece of jewelry. So this is how a stone goes from mediocre to amazing and finds the highest markets. Now, let me show you another one, not so high value, just so we can get an idea about a more common stone. So we're looking at a Spessartite garnet. Nice color, not so expensive per carat, only $800 a carat. So we're looking at, sort of a medium range stone, $6,000 for the stone. Again, this picture is after the recut. So we started with 7.5 carats. We lost 2.5 carats. So by the original value, we just lost $2,000 off of a $6,000 stone. So that's a quarter of the original value. What's going to happen? What do you think? So we end up with a 5 carat stone, and we started with a $6,000 7 carat stone. Now we're ending with a $7,000 5 carat stone. So we went from $800 a carat to $1,400 a carat. And again, this is coming back to improving the beauty of the stone. So this original stone had some inclusions that were very distracting and were able to be removed by doing the recut. So we improved the clarity by improving the angles on the bottom and top of the stone, as well as improving the polish. We have improved the color, and also now this shape that was less than perfect. As you can see now, it's a perfect oval shape that anybody would pick up and fall in love with. We've got a stunning, bright, reflective orange color. And as I said, we have done a true magical trick here by losing a quarter of the weight, but increasing the stone by $1,000 total value. So that's just a couple of examples, just to give you guys some ideas about the power of gemstone cutting, the kinds of abilities that the gem cutter has in their arsenal when they truly know what they're doing as far as how to cut the stone, how to understand the gemological and physical requirements of the stone, as well as perfecting and honing their craft and being able to create a perfect shape, being able to apply a perfect polish, and also being able to create a balanced faceting pattern that really works for the material and works differently than we might do for every other type of stone. So that's just a quick glimpse into the power of gem cutting for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. And I am now going to take some questions. I'll go into the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, I see there's already a few in there, but feel free to put some in. And you guys can find me at some websites, Instagram, all the social medias. If you're not following me, if you haven't met me, I'm sharing this kind of information all the time through Instagram, through Facebook, showing a lot of the before and after pictures and some of the journeys that these kind of gemstones go on, as we have customer stones coming in here to Bangkok and then going back out to countries all over the world. And so a lot of the stuff that I mentioned here today is in this new book that I mentioned, The Secret Teachings of Gem Cutting. So this is up on Kickstarter right now. We're pre-ordering this. So if you guys are interested in going deeper, the book is definitely the way to go. So let me check out some of the Q&A here and see what you guys are thinking about. So first question, this is from, and apologies if I mispronounce some of your guys' names. Yasiru, he's asking, do you cut gems according to calculations? I would say yes. As I've just shown, we're really taking into consideration the angles of each stone. Every type of gemstone material, from quartz to aquas to emeralds to tourmalines to spinels to sapphires to zircons, all need different angles. They all need different proportions. They all need different kind of faceting patterns, even, in order to really bring out the pure beauty of that stone. We want to be able to get color, we want to be able to get brilliance and brightness, and we also want to keep the weight. We have to be able to do all of those things, and the good gem cutter will know how to balance those things. As I said before, the art and the science, we need to be able to have mastered both of those things. So we're definitely taking into consideration the angles and calculating what kind of angles are going to work best for different types of stones. Okay, next question from Barry Mixon. You keep talking about angles. Where does somebody get that type of training? I'm in the US. Good question. So anybody could go through a gemology program and you're going to get some sense about the fact that there are, kind of what I just presented. There are different requirements for different stones. Some stones need to be deeper, meaning steeper angles, and some need to be more shallow. Where do you actually learn, though, those specific numbers, those specific ratios, and even the specific patterns? So yeah, we've got a school out here in Bangkok, IGT, the Institute of Gem Trading. So we're teaching these exact types of things. We've got a 2-week course where you can learn gemstone cutting. Of course, though, you'd have to come out here to do that. So if you're in the US, I would say definitely you can see the book on the screen. This has a lot of this type of information. I've put, kind of a whole crash course in the beginning of the book of, how to understand yield, how to understand the angles that different stones need, how to understand refractive index and critical angle, and all of these sort of scientific aspects of the stones. And then I've given you 50 different designs with different height ratios. So you've got deep ones, you've got shallow ones that are going to work for different types of stones. So I would say that's a good place to start. Definitely, find me on Instagram. I'm posting stuff, educational content on there all the time. So that's a good way to get a little bit of a taste. And then we also have some online classes that we do as well. So you can get a hold of me later about that. Okay, so next question. This is from Amrish Burton. He says, so we know that gem cutters need to maximize profits for their clients. This is usually done by favoring carat size over cut, which is often result in large windows or nail heads. The thing is, usually not beneficial. So my question is, are there any new cuts playing with angles, numbers of facets that are being developed to maximize both carat weight and cut quality instead of having to recut, etc., with values improved? Also, if yes, how do the new cuts fare against the market, especially high end? Great question. And I've got great news for you. Actually, we don't really. There are definitely new cuts and lots of different types of cuts, but it's not always just about the cuts. It's really about the angles. A lot of the cuts that we're using in our studio are really the classic cuts, and the ones that I presented here in the book are also, they're really the classic cuts, but it's really about kind of changing our philosophy a little bit because, as I've shown in some of those previous stones, bigger stone doesn't always mean more value. Sometimes it does. Usually in the world of rubies, bigger stones do mean more value as long as the color is right. If you have a bright red stone, it's big, the bigger the better. But, as we saw in that 96 karat tourmaline, the bigger stone was not worth more than the smaller stone because the color was undesirable. The big window, the big fisheye, the customer couldn't sell it. He had it for years sitting in his showcase. He couldn't sell it. So, I think we really need to try to change our mentality about thinking that bigger is always better, because it's not true. There has to be a balance, right? Like, you can't lose 80% of your stone in order to create a bright, brilliant stone, but you also can't try to keep 90% of the rough in order to create an ugly big stone. So there has to be a middle ground. And I think, the best cutters know usually where that middle area is. I know I can lose a little bit more weight. Maybe I can lose 10% of the weight, but the beauty, the color, the brightness goes up 50%. So in that case, as I've shown in some of those previous slides, sometimes we've lost, in certain cases, we can lose 50% of the weight and increase the value by 200 or 300%. So, there's not going to be one rule, though. There's not one rule that applies to every stone, because every stone is different. And that's really where the mastery comes in. The difference between a beginner cutter and a master cutter is knowing when to lose more weight to get more beauty and when to keep more weight, because you're not going to be able to get anything more than what you're already seeing. And that comes with experience. Okay, next question. This is from Ashley Jones. How does one start their journey into gem cutting or seek mentorship? I already have gemologist certification, but I'd love to get started. I think having the gemology training is great. This is not the way that I started. I did it the other way. I started as a gem cutter and then went to gemology school later, because I sort of understood that I needed to know more. I knew how to cut stones, but I didn't know anything about the science. I didn't really understand the difference between the stones, like, oh, I've got an emerald, I've got a demantoid garnet. They're both green. What's the difference? And of course, there are really big differences between a demantoid garnet and an emerald. They need different angles. They need a different kind of handling, and they need different treatments sometimes as well. So having the gemology information is good, but then finding that, as I was saying before, finding a class, finding a mentor, finding a book such as the one on the screen, these are all helpful. I mean, the best thing you can do is find a teacher. Like for me, I started as a self-taught cutter, but when I moved to Bangkok and I really started working with Thai cutters, Sri Lankan cutters, French cutters, that was when really my apprenticeship started. That was when my mentorship started. And that's when I saw my development as a cutter, just grow astronomically. So if you can find someone around you, or maybe, now we're kind of living in the world of Zoom and video calls. If you can find a cutter who will be able to give you some time, either in person or with a good video, webcam experience, you're going to be able to learn a lot that way. I mean, there's a lot of great books out there. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube that will get you started. And then of course, we've got classes out here. There's some people teaching classes in various other parts of the world. But I would say if you're trying to get there fast, a class would be the best way. Or if you can find a mentor, that would be amazing as well. And of course, the better the mentor, the better your experience is going to be. So if your mentor is a beginner, you're only going to be able to go so far. Okay, next question. This is Nusser Manan asking, how do you identify a stone? How do you identify if a stone is worth a recut? This is a great question. Very difficult question to answer because every stone is different, and it's really going to take having the stone in your hands. I mean, we get so many people that are messaging us online, Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram, sending us videos saying, what can you do? How can this stone be improved? Can you make it better? And sadly, I almost always have to tell them it's really hard for us to look at a video and understand what we can do. The gemstone is really a 3D object. It's not just how it looks from the front or how it looks from the bottom. We really have to take it in our hands, and in our in our lighting environment that we're used to, and in the color of the light that we're used to, we look at the stone, we look at the proportions, we look at the angles, we look at the symmetry, everything. We look at every part of the stone, and we try to understand what's wrong with it. What's the customer trying to get out of it, or what are we trying to get out of it? And then we try to think about, is it possible? Sometimes you can improve a stone, and this is the worst for us as cutters. We always want to make the stone better, but sometimes it's not possible. The stone is too dark, the stone is black, the stone is so flat that you're going to lose all of the stone in order to get the angles better. So it really takes some experience to look at the stone and say, yes, we should recut it, or no, we shouldn't. And sometimes we really have to convince our customers that the answer is no. They always want to give it to us and have us recut it. But sometimes, if I know that the color or the brilliance or the beauty is not going to be increased, and we're just going to lose weight, then we can't do our magic trick, right? We can't make the stone more valuable. And if the customer doesn't understand that, they're having an expectation that's unrealistic. We really have to try to convince them, you should leave the stone as it is. Like, the stone can only go down in value, unfortunately. And then, sometimes we can, and we have to be able to look at the stone, usually in person, and make that decision. So sometimes people mail us stones, and we tell them, we're going to mail this back to you because we don't feel like we can improve anything, and we're just going to waste your money. We don't want to do that. We want to make you money, so you're going to be happy. So that's how we usually proceed. Okay, Sawar Khalil asks, in your institute, are you teaching precision cutting? Yes, definitely. One of the things that I really focus on in my classes is, perfect symmetry, perfect meet points, perfect polish, proper proportions. As I said, everything's about balance and compromise. So sometimes, making the stone brighter means losing more weight, and we have to really think about the angles and the type of pattern that we're going to use. But there's no reason why we shouldn't always, use the best possible polish that we can use, make the stone as shiny and bright as we can. And there's not usually a good reason why we can't get perfect meet points and perfect balance. I mean, sometimes if the stone has a bad outline and it's going to lose too much weight to make the perfect cushion or the perfect oval, then, we talk to the customer and say, how much weight do you want to lose? If you only want to lose 1 carat, we can do this. But if you want to lose 3 carats, well, we can do this. And so, yeah, every stone will be different. But when we teach the cutting, we're definitely teaching people how to see perfect cutting and how to do perfect cutting so that they can have the experience and have the choice of what could this stone receive in order to make it better. Okay, Paula Stewart asking, can recutting a stone such as Alexandrite improve the color change? Good question. I don't have a ton of experience with color change stones. We've never done an Alexandrite. We've done color change garnets, color change sapphires, and zoltanite. I would say, yeah, it can improve it doesn't improve the color change necessarily, but it improves your perception of the color. So if the stone's not cut well and it's dark, the color looks dark. If you can improve the angles and improve the brightness of the stone, then the color is going to get brighter. So therefore, if your color's going from red to green or whatever change you might see, seeing the color better, having a more vibrant color should improve the color. That being said, if your stone's really, really dark, you might not want to increase the saturation of the stone, because a dark color with an increased saturation will get maybe too dark. Sometimes it can be black. So we really have to look at the tone and say, okay, this stone is light, or this stone's medium, or this stone's dark. And then we make a plan for how to improve for that specific needs. Okay, next question. These are all great questions. I want to thank you guys for giving me such interesting thoughts. So this is Subhash Parikh. He's asking, is it decided critical angle for each and every gemstone? Yes. Every gemstone has a refractive index. That refractive index, that's kind of how the gemologists that's how they test gemstones to try and figure out what they are. One of the tools that they use is the refractive index. So every material has a refractive index. They're all different. So the diamond refractive index is high, the sapphire one is a little bit lower, the emerald one is much lower, and the amethyst and the citrine are very low, on the scale of jewelry gems. So every stone has that specific number of RI, refractive index. That's how much the light bends when it goes inside of the stone. And so with the critical angle comes directly from the refractive index. So for instance, the critical angle of a sapphire is like 35.5, whereas the critical angle of a citrine, I think, is something like 40 or 41, something like that. So if you cut a citrine with the same kind of angles that you're going to use for a sapphire, 35 degrees, you're going to make a window. You can't cut a citrine or an emerald with sapphire angles. They don't work that way. You could cut a sapphire with citrine angles, because the citrine angles are deeper. They work for the sapphire. Same as a diamond. You could cut a diamond with a sapphire angles, but you couldn't cut a sapphire with diamond angles, because diamond angles are a lot more flat because the RI is higher. So yeah, you really need to understand the angles that each stone can have. And I've got a whole chart of those in my book. So if you need to know, you can do that way. Okay, Victoria B is asking, how do you minimize carat weight loss when recutting a gemstone? Excellent question. This is really the most challenging thing. A lot of times when people send us stones for recutting, especially expensive stones like emeralds, we really sit with them for a long time, and we really do a lot of math to figure this out. If I'm working on a 20 carat emerald and the customer says I can lose 4 carats because they want to close the window, I've got to figure out, can I actually change my angles? If the angles are flat, I need to make them a little bit steeper to close the window. But of course, making them steeper means I'm losing some material from down here. So I need to make sure, can I actually do that and only lose 4 carats or only lose 1 carat or whatever? So I need to figure that out. And then, yeah, I need to make sure, is it really going to do the thing that I do? Because if I just recut the stone and close the window, I might lose too much weight. And if I just cut off 4 carats without thinking about how I do it, I might not close the window. I might just make it smaller, but not close all the way, which would maybe upset the customer. So it's hard to give a simple answer, but just to say, we really have to look at the stone. We really have to measure it and think about it, and also use our experience of, what we've done before. And then there's also a little bit of improvisation as well. Sometimes we don't totally know until we start recutting. We try to make the best guess and try to tell the customer our best estimation. But honestly, we really don't know until we actually start grinding away some material and we really see, how did the new angles come in? What are they doing? And sometimes for the very valuable stones, we really have to cut a little bit, take the stone out of the machine and weigh it, and then put it back and cut a little bit more and weigh it. If it's a really, really tight weight loss allowance, we have to be super, super careful. And then it takes a lot longer. We have to take a lot more care and time in order to make that work. So it's pretty challenging. Okay, Hitesh Verma asking, not all gem cutters are professionally qualified, still they bring out good cuts. Any reason why they're able to master this art? Example, gem cutters from Jaipur. Definitely. I would completely agree with you. Part of my journey as a gem cutting historian has been to travel around the world and meet gem cutters from all over the place. Jaipur is definitely one of the places I really, really want to go. I haven't been there yet, but I've been to, let's say, some of the cutting houses in Sri Lanka and definitely the cutting houses here in Bangkok, where I would say almost none of the gem cutters are professionally qualified. They don't, I mean, from the Western point of view, they don't know anything about gemology. They might not know anything about the angles they're cutting with. And in the case of, I think in Jaipur and in Bangkok, the types of machines that people are using, they don't even tell you the angles anyway. So even if you knew all of your gemology and all of the kinds of stuff that I'm talking about in the book, the machine wouldn't be able to tell you the angle anyway. But that being said, some of the best cutters in the world are in Jaipur or in Bangkok or even in London and France, where they also have these sort of old-fashioned machines and they don't know the angles, but they're cutting some of the best, most beautiful stones in the world. So that's really going to come down to, having, let's say, hundreds, if not thousands of years in the case of Jaipur and in the case of Sri Lanka. These guys have been cutting gemstones for thousands of years. Every time a master trains a student through those thousands of years, they're learning all of the same stuff that we learn through modern science. When we test a stone and figure out that, okay, the sapphire needs 35 degrees, when I go to the Thai cutter, they don't know anything about 35 degrees, but they do know that, the sapphire needs like let's say a 36% height to width ratio, because that's going to make a stone that doesn't window. So what I found is all of the traditional cutters, they pretty much know all the same stuff, but they know it in a different way. They know it through proportion, or they know it just through experience, or they know it through having done it 1,000 times before and seeing what happens, trial and error. So, for me personally, I've really felt, as an American living in Asia, I've really felt like I have to be on the fence. I'm in the middle between the Western scientific world and the world of being professionally qualified, and the traditional world of Asia and Europe, where cutters maybe don't know the exact science and the numbers that gemology will tell us, but they have all this personal and professional experience through master cutters teaching new master cutters. And so I love to see, the balance between both of these worlds, and I really try to be the bridge to connect them together. That's what I've made my personal mission in my gem cutting life. Okay, Rod Knowles asking, how often do you find recuts to turn out to be an almost break-even result? And do you have to have an approximate formula for deciding whether a stone is worth the cost of recutting to increase the value? Hard to say. A lot of the stones that we do recut are for customers, so I don't always know the value of the stone, and I don't always know the value that they're selling them for. But I would say it's rare that we just break even. Almost always we increase value because we're increasing the color saturation or the brightness of color. I would say there has been a few times where I think that the recutting has been worse. I think there's a few times when we've lost value, and usually that has to do with the customer insisting on the recut, even though we've kind of counseled them not to do it. I know recently we did a really big Spinel recut, and we kind of told the customer we don't really think that we should do the recut. we don't think we can really improve the appearance of the stone. But the customer had had this stone for so long and hadn't been able to sell it. He was sort of desperate, and he was really willing to try anything. And sometimes when the customer is in that attitude, um, and we warn them, well, this is what we think is going to happen. Do you agree? And if they say yes, then okay, it's their stone. We'll do whatever people want us to do. But I'm not, sometimes, we try to encourage people, just leave it as it is. Sometimes you can't increase the stone. If the stone is almost black, I've done some really, really dark color change tourmalines. And I told the guy, I really don't think the material can get better, but if you really want me to, I'm willing to try, but I can't guarantee that, the value will go up. And so in those cases, I look at it as an experiment. As long as the customer has a realistic expectation of what could happen, it's okay. If they think you're going to do a miracle and you do a disaster, that's bad. And we try to never do that. We always try to talk to the customer first and say, this is what we think is going to happen. So, okay. This is from Keith Clare asking, I assume much of this is learned from experience in cutting hundreds of stones. Do you tend to specialize in one material? Not really. I mean, we can definitely cut anything. We definitely have stones that we like to cut better. And for me personally, since COVID started, I've made it a decision that I'm going to start specializing in emeralds, partially because I like emeralds, and I've kind of fallen in love with emeralds since I've started cutting them. I didn't really used to like them before I ever cut them. I just thought, okay, they're green, that's it. But once I started to cut them, I really fell in love with the color. There's two colors inside of an emerald, and the way that you cut them balances those two colors. So I started to fall in love with the color, but then also from a business point of view, I also noticed that nobody really here is specialized very much in emeralds. And when I look over Instagram at some of the other American cutters and the other professional cutters I know, I don't see that many people cutting emeralds. And obviously there are a lot of emerald cutters, but people that I know and people that are kind of in my world, they're doing sapphires and they're doing tourmalines and spinels, but I don't see too many emerald cutters. So I thought this could be fun. Maybe I could be the guy. When all the other older master emerald cutters are gone, I can be the next one. So I've kind of decided for myself that I'm going to specialize in emeralds, but we still cut everything, and whatever people send us, we enjoy usually. That being said, I guess the one thing I don't really like to do is quartz. We try to stay away from quartz. It's kind of a pain in the neck for polishing, and the value of quartz is usually a little bit low for the prices that we charge, so it doesn't really usually make sense. So in that case, we try to use some of the factories here that we've partnered with in Bangkok so that we can kind of keep the prices a little bit lower for the lower value stones. Okay, Josh F asking, how do you determine gemstone prices and how much we should purchase them for? This is a great question, and I am not at all qualified to answer this question. This is probably my worst kind of level of expertise. Most of the time we are just purely cutters. We're cutting other people's stones, so we don't always know the price that they're worth, and we don't know how much they sell them for. We do cut our own stones and sell our own stones. So, we've learned a little bit about specifically, the prices of emeralds, the prices of certain kinds of sapphires, but I don't have a good answer for this. Usually whenever I have a stone and I don't know what it's worth, which is most of the time, I usually just call some friends that are gem dealers who are buying and selling every day. Obviously the prices of stones change all the time. They might change every year, every month, every season, maybe even every day, depending on, the supply and demand. And of course, right now during this pandemic time, the prices are just crazy, and some are going up, some are going down, depending on a million other factors. So I don't really have a good answer. If you're in North America, there's the Gem Guide. There's a magazine called the Gem Guide, which I know some people use. But here in Bangkok, the Gem Guide doesn't work. The prices in the Gem Guide are not at all priced for Asia, and they don't help us. So usually I just phone a friend. That's my best answer. Okay, Kalyani Lama asks, is it possible to see you working from beginning to end on a stone? Actually, yes, you can. I've got a ton of videos on YouTube. If you type my name in on YouTube, Justin K Prim, I've got a whole playlist of videos. Some of them are like abridged, like you can see me cutting a whole stone in 5 minutes. And see all the steps. But I've got some really long ones on there from the beginning of COVID. I was doing some live streams where you can see me cutting the entire stone over the course of like 3 or 4 hours. So if you really want to see the entire process in real time, there's a couple videos like that up there too. So yeah, find me on YouTube. YouTube is like my favorite social media right now. That I've really been focused on making videos since COVID started. Trying to be as educational as I can since the school's been closed here. I'm just trying to make a lot of really fun educational videos. So definitely look on there for that kind of stuff. Okay, Osman Fauzan asks, why windows occur? Good question. Really good question. I think a lot of people really don't understand. It's pretty simple though. As I said, every stone has a specific RI, right? Every material bends light in a specific way. Some bend the light more, some bend the light less. And so depending on how the light's bending when it goes into the stone, we might need to have a deeper pavilion, or we might need to have a more shallow, or I mean, we can have a more shallow pavilion. So it's really going to depend on the angles. If your stone needs to be deep and you cut it flat, you're going to get a window. If your stone needs to be deep and you cut it deep or even deeper, usually that's okay. Sometimes if it's too deep, it can make the stone dark, but it usually means either the stone's flat, like it's just really flat, or sometimes the stone's deep enough, but the angles are too rounded. Like a lot of times when I see stones in Portuguese cuts or flower cuts, they're so rounded that the last few sets of angles are just too flat, like they're almost parallel with the table. And so then the light just goes straight through instead of bouncing. And again, I have a whole section on this in my book explaining how this works and how to avoid it. Okay, Janice Snape asking, how are specialty fancy cuts valued versus common cuts at the same weight? This is a very tricky question. I can't give a simple answer to this because it really has to do with the market. So one thing that I haven't mentioned at all in this talk is market value. So if you have a stone, whatever stone it is, let's say it's one of those spinels that I recut earlier in the talk. You have that spinel in Bangkok, it has a certain price. You take that stone to Hong Kong, it has a different price. You take it to London, it has a different price. Paris has a different price. New York has a different price. Tucson has a different price. Now, the price between New York and Tucson probably isn't that different. It might be really different though than the price between London and New York, or London and Hong Kong, and definitely the price in Bangkok is going to be lower. So where you're selling the stone is going to change the value. Besides that, what market are you selling to? Are you selling on Instagram to the final customer? Because then, of course, the price is higher. Are you selling to a jeweler who also has to add some value, add some value on top? So they have to kind of get the wholesale price. Are you selling at the gem market in Bangkok where there's a million stones to choose from and your stone is only one in a million? All of these things change the price. So there's not going to be one formula. So that being said, fancy cuts then have their own special relationship. If you are a super famous cutter who has a million followers on Instagram that buy stones from you and they want stones because you're a famous cutter. And I mean, I think a great example of this would be Viktor Tuzlakov. His stones are probably more expensive than anybody else's stones in the world because he's famous for creating amazing works of art, gemstone art. So if he cuts a gemstone amethyst and I cut a gemstone amethyst, the price is going to be way different. And then if I take my gemstone amethyst and compare it to another fancy cut amethyst that I can find here in Bangkok, which I can find fancy cut, concave cut, frosted cut amethyst here in Bangkok, those prices are a lot lower because they're targeted towards the wholesale market. So that's a really complicated question. I mean, you can already imagine how many variables are in that between, are you wholesale, are you retail, are you directly to the end customer, and are you in America, are you in Europe, are you in India, are you in China, are you in Bangkok? All those things change the price. So I can't really give a great answer on that. It's really going to be about the market and how you sell the stone. A good comparison would be, is a blue sapphire that's in a Van Cleef and Arpels or in a Tiffany's ring more expensive, or is it more valuable than if I had it? And the answer is yes, of course. Like, a Tiffany can sell a blue sapphire way more expensive than I can because they're Tiffany. Van Cleef and Arpels can sell the same sapphire that I can sell for a way higher price because it's Van Cleef and Arpels. And the same being said, I can probably sell a stone more than, a random guy in a random country who nobody knows, because more people know me, and more people know that I cut nice stones. So I've kind of created that kind of brand name on a small scale for myself. So complicated answer, but that's the best I can say. War Khalil asks, while you're live, I wanted to ask you alternative ways to buy your book. I'm in Sri Lanka. I totally understand. The book shipping is a little bit expensive. I'm sorry about that. I couldn't do anything better than what it is. The best idea, after the Kickstarter's over in October, I mean, after the books are printed and they're here in October, you can come and find me and avoid the shipping. If you're going to be in Bangkok or Tucson, or if I'm coming to Sri Lanka, or if I'm coming to Australia, or if I'm coming to India, I'm going to bring some books with me for sure. I'm always going to bring books with me now. So if I'm going to be where you're at, we can avoid the shipping that way. Or the other alternative right now, if you can find a bunch of people in your area, like I know there's at least 3 or 4 people in Sri Lanka that have already bought books. If you guys are all in the same city, you could put them all in the same box, change your Kickstarter to one of the bigger boxes. The shipping price goes way down. If you buy 8 books, the shipping price is like $12. If you buy 1 book to Australia or Sri Lanka or something, it's like $40. So that's a good way. If you want to get the book quicker, you can find a friend, put them in the same boxes. As long as there's more than 2, like 3 books up to 8 books saves money. So that's the best idea. Or try to come and find me. I'm in Bangkok. I'll have books here. Barry Mixon, what happens if you miscalculate the angles? How much do you play? How much play do you have before you get fired? Good question. Kind of a funny question. So I'm guessing you mean if I mess up one of the customer's stones. It doesn't really happen that much, really. I mean, we know the angles. The Spinel all has the same angles. Tourmaline all has the same angles. We pretty much know how to do all the angles correctly. Usually it has to do with how dark the stone is, or how included the stone is, or how much weight we lost. That's usually where the stress comes from. If we lose too much weight, or if the stone didn't really get as bright as what we hoped because it was dark, that's usually where it comes from. I mean, usually we can put the perfect angles on a dark stone, it's still a dark stone. So there's just not much you can do. We love to cut, of course, the medium tone stones, not too light, not too dark. Because of course, if the stone's too light, like, really light aqua, if you make the stone cut really bright, you can lose all the color, right? Like I've turned, in my apprenticeship time, I have turned some light color topaz or light color aqua totally white with brilliant cuts that are too bright. So, usually if we have a customer that's unhappy, we try to figure out how we can make the situation right. But usually we're already unhappy before the customer already knows. So if we know that we still have some room to fix it, or if there is a way to fix it, we'll do that before showing the customer. But usually there's not a way. Usually we guessed correctly the first time, and it's it's the stone's fault. It's not our fault. Kidding, but sometimes it really is the stone's fault. Okay, Janice Snape, what are some differences between cutters in different countries you've mentioned? This is really my favorite question because this is my passion. I love going around the world and seeing how cutters are cutting. But I would say the quickest answer I can give is going to have to do with technology. When we look in America, people are using super sophisticated, well manufactured masked machines. When we look in the traditional cutting of Europe, they're using JamPeg machines, and a lot of times they're hand cranked JamPeg machines. And then when we look into, let's say, like Sri Lanka or Japan, they're using handpiece machines. A lot of Africa is using handpiece machines coming from Sri Lanka. So we've got these kind of three different types of technology. And depending on the technology they're using, their approach is different. So, of course, if they're using a JamPeg machine, they're not really thinking about angles, they're thinking about proportions. If you're using a masked machine or maybe even a handpiece machine, which has angles, we don't really need to think about the proportion as much as the actual angles that are used. The angles that we cut at make the proportion, because flatter angles make a shallower proportion, deeper angles make a deeper proportion. So that's one thing. And then, some people, depending on where they live, have more access to education. So if you have been trained with the gemology side of things as well, you're going to bring in the gemology into your gem cutting. Whereas if you don't know anything about gemology, you're only going to know as much as the other cutters around you know. Like, for instance, if you're in Sri Lanka, you're probably going to know a lot about sapphire. You're going to know a lot about garnets and tourmalines because you have those stones. I find most of the Sri Lankan cutters that I work with, they don't really know much about emeralds because they don't have emeralds in Sri Lanka. Whereas if you go to Colombia, where they have lots of emeralds and lots of quartz, they know a lot about those stones. But I would guess that the cutters in Colombia probably don't know very much about sapphire because they don't really cut a lot of sapphire. So that's the brief answer to that question. But I've got a lot of videos kind of talking about that kind of stuff on YouTube. So if you can go onto YouTube, check some of those out where I'm talking about different stuff like that. Darshan Singh, setup and cost required for gem cutting. I'm going to give out a really fast answer. $2,000. I've got a PDF that I can send you that has a list of all the tools that we use for our school, and I've made this list for my students. So somewhere around $2,000, you can get everything you need for a very good handpiece based setup that anybody can learn in like 6 weeks to 6 months. So maybe send me a message later, like on Instagram or Facebook, and I will send you the link. Or anybody that wants that link, I can send it later for a PDF with the whole shopping list. Okay, Mubarak Musin asks, in your experience, what is your take on gem cutters of Sri Lanka? We have some amazing cutters in Sri Lanka. However, the majority of cutters here go for weight over beauty. Do you mostly recut stones that come from Sri Lanka? I got a really lovely relationship with Sri Lankan cutters. One of my main mentors is Sri Lankan, and one of my main partners for teaching in the school is Sri Lankan. So I've really adopted the Sri Lankan technique for my own. I'm using a Sri Lankan machine every day. So I've been there several times. I love Sri Lanka. I love the food. I love the people. I love the stones that come out of there. That being said, just like any country, you have good cutters and bad cutters. I mean, the same can be said about London and America and France. You've got good cutters and bad cutters, and I wouldn't classify them by country. I wouldn't say. I personally think that Sri Lanka has some of the best cutters in the world because they have that experience and they also have good machines. Whereas, Thailand, they have great cutters as well, but they don't have 1,000 years of mining experience. The people have only been cutting in Thailand for less than 100 years, and the machines of Thailand can only take you so far because they don't know the angles and they don't have some of the more modern technology that Sri Lanka has adopted in the last 30 years or maybe 50 years. So yeah, I think the best cutters in Sri Lanka are the best cutters in the world. The worst cutters in Sri Lanka are the same as everybody else. Just they're learning. So, but yeah, we recut a lot. Not necessarily from Sri Lanka. I would say we recut more Burmese stones than Sri Lankan stones because I think the Burmese stones, their technology is probably the most crude of anybody else. Some of them can do amazing stones, but I would say the general level of Burmese cutters is probably lower than Sri Lanka, lower than Thailand, maybe lower than India. I'm not sure. just depending on the cutter though, really. Can you recommend any good books for someone who's a beginner gem cutter? And also, do I need to be a gemologist to become a gem cutter? This is Maymun Adin. Yes, the book on the screen. It's really a great book for someone who wants to learn cutting and also to learn a little bit of the gemology side. You don't need to be a gemologist to be a gem cutter, but it definitely helps. I'll recommend one other book that I think is really great. I think besides my book, and I'm not just saying my book because it's my book, I really try to make my book something super useful for gem cutters, something that doesn't exist already. But the other one that's really, really good, Amateur Gemstone Faceting Volume 1, Tom Herbst. You can get this on Amazon. You can get it. Yeah, I think Amazon, you can ship it around the world. It's like $25. It's only about cutting, but if you're learning cutting, this is a great book. It's like a whole class inside of a book. Amateur Gemstone Faceting Volume 1. That's my best recommendation other than the one you see on the screen. Okay, next question. This is Awadesh Melik. I was wondering by the fact, how do you assign price to recut stones depending on color, shape, clarity? Good question. I mean, I kind of already answered this one already. It's really going to depend on the stone. You know, I'm obviously like, if we recut a ruby, it's going to be worth more than a sapphire. And if we recut a blue sapphire, it's going to be worth more than a gray spinel. And a gray spinel is going to be worth more than an amethyst. So, you know, of course, there's only every stone has their own range of how expensive can they be, you know, and that's going to be based on the market demand. But, you know, usually, again, if I don't know the price for something, I just ask some of the gem dealer friends that I have here in Bangkok, say, what should this price be? And then if it's something that we've done before, like we've done a lot of Burmese spinels, we've done a lot of Umba sapphires, we kind of know the prices for those now because we sold a lot of them. And, you know, I've seen what people will pay. And we've also seen sometimes we price them too high and a year goes by and we don't sell the stone and we think, oh, yeah, the price is too high. We're going to take it down a little bit. You know, as long as we're making some profit and we're paying for the cutting, it's okay, right? If you can make more money, that's good. But if you can just make some money, that's good too, you know. And I think the longer you hold the stone, the less, the more you're willing to lose in order to just flip the stone. You know, sometimes even you've had the stone for 10 years, you don't really care if you make the profit anymore. Just move it out of the safe so you can have some more room for new stuff. So that's my answer. Okay, next one. Average time it takes, let's say 6 hours. Cutting angles are good. Do you provide certificates? No. Is there any software? Yes. I have a class about that, so send me a message about that. Okay, I think that was those are the good questions. Anybody else that has any more questions, they can just send me a message. I'm always answering questions all day long with people on social media, so feel free. And Nicole, thank you so much. GemAtlas, thank you guys so much for inviting me. And yeah, thanks for all the great questions. That's like the most questions I've answered in a row in a long time.
We'd really like to thank you for your time and your expertise to make it such an informative session with an amazing audience that was so engaging. We had a lot of questions rolling in still.
Yeah,
and we definitely like to thank the audience as well for their participation. If you have any further questions, you can email it at info@gematlas.com and we will also help you forward the same to Justin. So thank you so much and have a good day.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the great questions and thanks for the time.